My wife refilled my wine the night my brother tried to take my name from me. She did it with the same calm hand she used to fasten my tie before charity dinners, funerals, and board meetings that mattered more than they admitted. The room was warm. The candles were low. Rain pressed softly against the tall windows of our house above Florence, and the long dining table shone with crystal, silver, and inherited restraint. My father had been dead for 19 days. That was why everyone had come. Not for grief. Grief had already done its private work by then. They came for the first family dinner after the burial, for the settling of posture, for the visible choreography of continuity. My father had built Valley Leather from a single workshop with 6 men and a stitched ambition into a house known across Europe. Bags, shoes, belts, travel cases. Old craft sold in quiet rooms to people who liked calling expense an appreciation of heritage. My father used to say luxury was simply the art of charging extra for memory. He had also said blood was the cheapest thing in any family. I had laughed the first time he told me that. I was 24 and still believed money made betrayal less likely because it made life easier. Age corrected me. At that table sat the people I had loved longest. My wife Elena, elegant as ever in black silk, her expression measured into sympathy. My younger brother Adriano, charming in the easy way men become charming when they learn early that other people mistake ease for innocence. 2 board members, our family solicitor. My daughter Clara, home from London with shadows under her eyes from the last-minute flight and the worse burden of losing the grandfather who had taught her to draw with a silver pencil on craft paper. At the far end of the room, my father's portrait looked down at us with the particular severity painters give the rich. Elena set the bottle beside my glass and touched my wrist. "Drink," she said softly. "You haven't eaten enough." There was tenderness in her voice, or something that knew how to imitate it. I thanked her and lifted the glass. Adriano waited until the main course had been cleared and Rosa had taken away the last of the plates. Only then did he reach into the inner pocket of his jacket and place a folder on the table as delicately as if he were setting down a prayer book. I did not touch it. "What is that?" I asked. He gave me the smile he had been using with banks for 10 years. White teeth, relaxed jaw, the smile of a man already standing in the future he has chosen for everyone else. "A temporary solution," he said, "for the company, for the family." Across from me, Elena lowered her eyes. Not in surprise, in timing. That was the first moment I knew. Not everything. Not yet. But enough. A betrayal does not arrive all at once. It enters the room before you understand it. It arranges the air. It waits for your body to notice what your mind would rather postpone. One of the board members, Giulio Ferrante, cleared his throat. He had known my father for 30 years and owed half his career to him. He would not meet my eyes. "Matteo," he said, "there are concerns." "About what?" Adriano pushed the folder an inch closer. "Liquidity, leadership continuity, the French acquisition talks, the Artisans' Pension Fund. We need stability right now, not uncertainty. You've had a terrible loss. No one is blaming you for that." I looked at him for a long second. "Then what are you blaming me for?" Elena spoke before he did. "No one is blaming you," she said. "But the last month has been difficult. You've missed calls. You've forgotten meetings. You signed the Livorno distribution amendment without reviewing the addendum." I turned to her. "You asked me to sign that in the hospital parking lot after my father's second stroke." "That is exactly my point," Adriano said smoothly. "You haven't been yourself." Clara looked from him to me and back again, confused, frightened, still too hopeful to understand the shape of what was happening. I opened the folder. Inside was a proposal for temporary medical leave. 3 months. Operational authority delegated to Adriano as interim managing director. Joint financial oversight by Elena and the board. A clause allowing the company to restructure certain family voting rights in the interest of lender confidence. I read it twice. Then I closed it. No. Adriano folded his hands. Read it again. I understood it the first time. Elena leaned toward me, voice gentle enough that anyone watching from a distance would have mistaken it for care. Matteo, this is not punishment. No, I said. It's theft with softer tailoring. Silence took the table. Giulio looked pained. Another board member, Livia Bassi, suddenly became fascinated by the stem of her glass. Clara spoke quietly. What is this? No one answered her immediately, so I did. This, I said, keeping my eyes on Adriano, is your uncle trying to use your grandfather's funeral flowers as cover for a coup. Don't be dramatic, Adriano said. He hated drama unless he was directing it. Then speak plainly, I said. You want control. Say it. He sat back. For the first time that night, something colder came into his face. I want the company to survive you, he said. It was not loud. That made it worse. Clara inhaled sharply. Elena reached for my hand. I moved mine first. That small gesture changed the room. It told them I understood more than they had planned for. Not everything, but enough to become inconvenient. Adriano went on. Our lenders are nervous. Paris is pressing for an answer on the licensing deal. There are irregularities in the pension reserve. The export insurance renewal was mishandled. We cannot afford hesitation from the top. The top, I said, is me. For now. He let the words rest there. I looked at Elena again. I had known her 26 years. 23 as my wife. I knew the line of her neck, the shape of her silence, the exact way she folded bad news before delivering it. I had loved her in apartments with no air conditioning, in hotel rooms during buying season, in the exhausted years when Clara was small and we both pretended we were less afraid than we were. I had watched her become fluent in rooms built to diminish women and then better than most men inside them. I had also missed things. That was becoming clear. How long? I asked her. She held my gaze, but only barely. Matteo, how long have you been planning this? Her mouth tightened. Adriano answered for her. Long enough to know it was necessary. The room blurred for a moment, not from weakness, but from the violence of restraint. My father had once told me that the first instinct after betrayal is almost always the one that ruins the injured party. Shouting, striking, begging, confessing pain to people who have already priced it. I stood. Clara stood with me. Papa, it's all right, I said. It was not all right, but she needed the sentence. I took the folder and slid it back across the table toward Adriano. If you want my company, I said, earn your own. He smiled without warmth. It may no longer be your decision. Then I left the dining room with my daughter beside me and every pair of eyes in that house following our backs. I did not slam a door. Men who slam doors announce defeat too early. I went to my study, poured the untouched wine into the sink, and stood there with both hands on the marble while my daughter waited in the doorway. What was that? She asked. I turned to face her. Clara was 21, clever enough to see structure in buildings before they existed, and still young enough to believe adults eventually become honest if pressed hard enough. I'm not fully sure yet, I said, but it is not about grief. She took a step closer. Mama said you've been making mistakes. And do you believe that? She hesitated. That hurt more than I expected. I think you've been distracted, she said carefully. Grandpa was dying. That would distract anyone. Yes. She searched my face. Are you all right? No one asks that question cleanly when there is money in the room. Not even the people who love you. I will be, I said. It was close enough to truth to survive the night. After she went upstairs, I stayed in the study until past midnight. I reviewed emails, bank memos, draft agreements, internal notes. I found nothing conclusive and too many things that now looked wrong. threads, timing. Small decisions I had let pass, because grief makes even intelligent men outsource their attention. At 1 in the morning, I went to our bedroom. Elena was awake, sitting at the edge of the bed in a robe the color of wet stone. She did not turn on the lamp when I entered. Light from the courtyard outside cut pale bars across the floor. "I didn't want it to happen like that," she said. I laughed once, not because anything was funny. "Like what?" I asked. "At dinner? In front of our daughter? Under my father's portrait?" She looked tired, genuinely tired. I do not deny her that. Betrayal costs the betrayer too, just not in the same currency. "You've been impossible to reach," she said. "Banks want answers. Adriano has been carrying too much." "Adriano has been carrying ambition," I said. "Do not confuse the two." She stood. The robe slid slightly at one shoulder. There was a perfume on her I did not recognize. Not strong. Just present enough to feel like a detail I should have already known how to read. "Matteo," she said quietly, "please don't force this into something ugly." I looked at her for a long time. "Ugly," I said, "begins when a wife helps her husband's brother prepare papers to cut him out of his own house. It is not your house alone." That sentence, that precise sentence, not the timing, not the board, not the folder. That was what killed the last of my uncertainty. I said nothing else. I slept in the guest room. The next morning I woke to rain and absence. Elena had left early for the office. Clara had taken the train to Milan to catch her flight back to London. Rosa brought me coffee and stood there longer than necessary, which in her case meant she wanted to say something. Rosa had worked for my family since before my marriage. She had folded Clara's first baby clothes. She had brought soup to my father after surgery. She knew every secret door in that house and had likely heard things none of us had intended to reveal. "Signore," she said, "you should eat." "Later." She set the tray down. "Then at least drink it while it is hot." I nodded. She did not move. "What is it, Rosa?" Her eyes flicked toward the door, then back to me. "Last night, after dinner, when everyone left the room." I waited. "Madam and your brother stayed behind. Only a minute. Maybe 2. I was in the pantry. I heard him say, 'He knows.'" A strange calm came over me. "And Elena?" I asked. She said, "Not enough." That was the second moment I knew. Not because it proved an affair, not because it solved the company, but because it revealed alignment. That private language of conspirators, the confidence, the compression, the absence of surprise. Rosa hesitated again. "There is one more thing." "Yes?" 3 nights ago, your wife left the house after midnight. She said she was going to the office because of the Paris call. But this morning, when I sorted the laundry, I found a valet ticket in her coat pocket." She reached into her apron and handed it to me. "Hotel Santa Lucia, 2:31 in the morning." I looked down at the slip of paper. A small thing. A simple thing. Enough. "Thank you," I said. Rosa gave a slight nod. "Your father used to say when wolves come into a house, they first try to make the dogs sleep." I almost smiled. "Yes," I said. "He did." By noon, I had called Miriam Orsini. Miriam had been my father's external counsel for 28 years and his personal executioner in all matters requiring patience dressed as paperwork. She was 61, silver-haired, exact, and impossible to charm once she had decided not to be. My father trusted very few people. Miriam was one of them. When my mother died, she handled the estate. When Adriano nearly wrecked the company at 30 with a leveraged expansion into Dubai, Miriam buried the documents that would have humiliated him publicly because my father asked her to save the family. She arrived at 3 in a navy coat with rain on the shoulders and took my study as if it were a courtroom. "Tell me what happened," she said. I did. She listened without interruption, which was one of the ways she intimidated men more effectively than shouting ever could. When I finished, she took off her glasses, cleaned them with a square of linen, and said, "Do you want my honest view or the soothing version?" "The honest one." "They're moving too fast for this to be spontaneous." I nodded. She set the glasses back on. "And if Adriano is invoking pension reserve irregularities, either he has discovered a problem he now wants to weaponize against you, or he created one and requires operational control before you find it." "Elena?" Miriam's expression did not change. "Whether she is with him emotionally is your problem. Whether she is with him legally is mine. There are friends who comfort you." Miriam never wasted time on comfort when structure was available. "What do you need from me?" I asked. "First, you sign nothing. Second, you say nothing that can be characterized as instability, threat, or confession. Third, you give me full access to everything from the last 18 months. Emails, internal approvals, side letters, debt covenants, board minutes, private WhatsApp chains if you still have them." "I do." "Good. Fourth," she said, "we assume there is more." "There is always more." "Yes," she said. "That is why families are so profitable for lawyers." She left with 2 archive boxes, my laptop clone, and enough information to start dismantling whatever they had built. That evening, Elena came home late. She stood in the doorway of the study and watched me as if I were an object whose function had recently changed. "Rosa said Miriam was here," she said. "She was." "For what?" "I thought I might enjoy my own lawyer if everyone else is already using theirs." A small flicker crossed her face. Annoyance, perhaps, or the first scent of risk. "This does not need to become war," she said. "Then perhaps your brother-in-law should not have launched it over Veal." She exhaled slowly. "You're making this harder." "No," I said. "I'm making it visible." She went quiet. In the old years, silence between us had held warmth, shared fatigue, practical understanding. Marriage is built mostly from the tolerable forms of silence. By then, ours had become administrative. "You think there's something between us?" she said at last. I looked up from the ledger in my hands. "Yes." Her face did not break. That told me more than denial would have. "You are grieving," she said, "and you are lying." She left the study without another word. 3 days later, Miriam returned with Farid Benali. Farid was a forensic accountant with a careful beard, unreadable eyes, and the posture of a man who had spent most of his career leaning over numbers while executives lied at him from expensive chairs. He placed a slim laptop on my desk and opened a spreadsheet that seemed, at first glance, like any other set of flows and balances. Then he began to speak. "There are 3 companies tied loosely to Valli through procurement and freight handling," he said. "All ordinary enough on paper. 1 in Lugano, 1 in Marseille, 1 in Luxembourg. They began receiving unusually high consulting and distribution fees 11 months ago. Small at first, then aggressive." "How much?" he clicked. "Just under 8.4 million euros in total exposure so far, direct and indirect." My body stayed very still. My hands did not. "Who owns them?" "Layers," Farid said. "But the Marseille entity routes through a holding vehicle whose beneficial interest points toward a trust managed by the same boutique office that administers Elena's personal investment portfolio." I stared at the screen. "And the others?" "Less direct. But the Lugano company signed a warehouse transition contract using digital authorization from your office at times you were verifiably elsewhere. One authorization was executed while you were in Vienna at the luxury conference, another while you were with your father in hospital." "Forgery?" "Or credential misuse," Miriam said. "The distinction matters to courts, not to me." Farid kept going. There were irregular transfers from the artisan's pension reserve into short-term instruments that had no business touching a conservative fund. There were rushed inventory valuations making the French licensing proposal seem more urgent than it truly was. There were insurance collateral documents naming contingent obligations I had never seen. Then he opened one last folder. "This," he said, "is more personal. Hotel Santa Lucia. 4 visits over 5 months. Same suite category, same corporate account masking. 1 guest profile under an assistant's name. The second billed as internal hospitality expense. On 2 nights, Elena's phone location and Adriano's driver logs placed them in the same area at the same times." I looked away from the screen. Miriam did not lower her voice. "I'm sorry," she said. It was the only soft sentence I got from her that week. "Is that all?" I asked. Farid exchanged a glance with her. "No," he said. "There is one more line item you should see." He opened a trust statement. My daughter's name was at the top. Clara Valley Educational Trust. I felt my throat close. "Tell me exactly," I said. Farid did. 3 withdrawals over 7 months, justified internally as temporary liquidity bridge instruments. The authorizations carried board-side support notes initiated through Elena's office and operational urgency memos tied to Adriano's Paris expansion push. The money had not disappeared entirely. It had been moved, rolled, disguised, and partially returned. But it had been touched, used. They had used my daughter's future as breathing room for their theft. I stood so quickly my chair struck the wall. Miriam remained seated. "This," she said, "is where restraint becomes useful." I turned away from them and went to the window. Below, the late afternoon rain made the stone courtyard look almost black. I heard my father's cane on those stones in my mind. Slow, stubborn, unforgiving. He had loved the company more openly than he loved his children, but he had loved us in the only vocabulary he trusted: continuity, discipline, protection from outsiders. He had always believed the danger would come from the market, competitors, the cheap appetite of private equity. He had underestimated intimacy. "What do they want?" I asked. "Control before discovery," Miriam said. "Likely a quick transaction. Paris or one of the bigger groups. Enough restructuring to bury the trail under integration. And perhaps," she added, "to characterize you as unwell before you contest anything." Farid closed the laptop halfway. "There are references in internal drafts to a capacity narrative. That phrase is not mine." I turned back slowly. "A what?" "A strategy memo from Elena's communications head to outside reputation advisors. It discusses compassionate transition planning should you require health-related withdrawal from public duties." Of all the things they had done, that was the one that nearly broke my restraint. Not the affair, not even the money. The plan to turn my grief into their explanation, to sand down my removal until it looked considerate. "They want me diminished," I said. "They want you interpretable," Miriam corrected. That evening I did something I had not done since my father died. I went into his office at the factory. No one used that room anymore. After the funeral, staff passed it the way Catholics pass a side chapel, carefully, with a small inward motion. The desk still held his brass lamp, his blotter, his hard candies, the leather tray where he kept unanswered letters. His coats were gone. That made the room feel more haunted, not less. I sat in his chair. There are fathers who leave affection. Mine left systems. I opened drawers, old correspondence, draft contracts, artisan notes, a list of names from 1987. Nothing, then something. At the back of the bottom drawer, beneath samples from a discontinued saddle line, I found a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's hand. I opened it there. "Matteo, if you are reading this, then either I am dead or you have finally learned that trust is best given in portions. The letter was only 2 pages, typical of him. He never believed length improved truth. He wrote that he had long suspected Adriano lacked the patience required to inherit stewardship without supervision. He said charm and appetite made a dangerous marriage in business. He admitted, in the stingiest possible language, that I had more of his temperament and therefore more of his burdens. Then came the part that mattered. 3 years earlier, after Adriano pushed for a private debt arrangement my father considered reckless, he had amended the company foundation charter through a dormant clause tied to artisan welfare protections. Under specific conditions, suspected fraud, misappropriation of reserve funds, or attempted transfer of controlling family authority during bereavement, the chair of the Artisan Heritage Foundation could trigger an emergency governance freeze. The chair, according to the addendum, was not me. It was Clara. My father had made my daughter the quiet failsafe against his sons. I sat there a long time with the letter in my hands. He had never told me. I understood why. If he had, I would have resisted. I would have called it theatrical, paranoid, unfair to Adriano. My father understood that the people best suited to preserve a structure are often the last to believe it needs protecting. I took the letter, locked the office, and drove back to the house in darkness. That night, Elena did not come to our bedroom. The next morning, I told everyone I was leaving Florence for a week. I told the board I needed air, distance, silence. I let Giulio hear that my doctor had recommended rest. I let Livia see me looking tired. I let Elena believe my movements had grown inward and erratic. I packed a small bag, kissed Rosa on the cheek, and drove south toward the old family villa near Siena that no one used anymore except during harvest dinners. I was not seeking rest. I was creating room. For 11 days I stayed there with Miriam, Farid, 3 secure hard drives, and a growing file thick enough to destroy reputations that had taken decades to tailor. We worked in the library with the shutters half closed against the heat. I slept badly and shaved less often. From Florence came carefully managed updates. Adriano had stepped into temporary expanded responsibility. Elena was handling media. The board was grateful for my discretion. Rumors had begun that I was exhausted, medically fragile, perhaps nearing collapse. An article in a trade publication mentioned leadership transition at Valli as if it were already inevitable. Good. Let them build the stage. In that villa, I read more truth in 10 days than in the previous 10 years. There were emails between Adriano and Elena that did not say love, but said everything around it. Timing, hotel rooms, private jokes too intimate for innocence. There were messages about Clara, coldly strategic, discussing how to keep her emotionally aligned and insulated from Matteo's paranoia. There were side letters about the Paris licensing group and a planned share conversion that would have made Adriano indispensable once I was publicly retired. There was also a draft media statement never sent, expressing my family's deep concern for my health. My health. It is strange what wounds the male ego chooses. Not the adultery, not the theft, the reduction, the repackaging of a life into a manageable statement written by someone you once trusted with your sleep. On the 5th day in Siena, Clara called. I stared at the screen before answering. "Hello, love?" Her voice was cautious. "Where are you?" "In Tuscany." "Why didn't you tell me?" "I am telling you now." Silence. Then, "Mama said you needed a break." Of course she did. "And what do you think?" I asked. "I think no one is saying anything clearly." She sounded tired. Older than 21. I sat down on the edge of the bed with the phone at my ear and looked out through the shutters at the cypress trees standing in still heat. "That is true," I said. "Listen to me. I need you to trust me for a little while, even if you are not sure why." She did not answer immediately. Finally, she said, "Did you take money from my trust?" There it was. They had reached her already. No, because Mama said there were timing issues, that you borrowed against things and it was temporary and Uncle Adriano was trying to fix it. I closed my eyes. Clara, I did not touch your trust. Another long silence. I don't know who to believe, she said. That sentence was fair. It also cut like wire. Believe this, I said. I have never once used your future to preserve my pride. I heard her breathing. Then quietly, that sounds like you. It was the closest thing to faith I had been given all week. Come to Florence on the 24th, I said. There will be a board presentation. Be there, no matter what your mother says. What's happening on the 24th? An unveiling, I said. I hated myself a little for the line. It sounded like my father. She came. That is the important part. By then, Adriano had scheduled a special board and investor dinner at the Palazzo Valli showroom during Florence's autumn buying week. The pretext was optimism, a transitional message, steady leadership, Paris in attendance, several journalists, a few lenders, enough witnesses to turn governance into theater. Adriano loved rooms like that, rooms where power could be announced in neutral colors. I arrived 12 minutes after the dinner began. No one had told them I would. The palazzo glowed against the street, windows lit, staff moving soundlessly behind the high glass. Inside, the showroom smelled of leather, old wood, and expensive perfume. Our current collection sat on raised platforms under warm light like offerings to gods with excellent credit. Conversations shifted as I entered. I had chosen my father's dark suit, the one that made me look more like him than I liked. Elena saw me first. The color left her face, then returned in a controlled wash. Adriano turned more slowly. For 1 second, just one, I saw fear. Real fear. It did not suit him. Giulio stepped forward. Matteo, we weren't expecting— No, I said. That was the point. Clara stood near the back beside one of the columns. She looked from me to her mother. I held her gaze only long enough to let her see that I was standing straight and entirely awake. Adriano recovered first. He always did. Brother, he said, spreading his hands, I'm glad you came. We were all concerned. Keep the concern, I said. You'll need it. A few of the guests laughed uncertainly, unsure whether they were witnessing family friction or something more expensive. Elena came toward me in a dress the color of black wine. She stopped just close enough that only I could hear her. What are you doing? She asked. Ending the confusion. Her eyes sharpened. Not here. Where you planned it is where we will finish it. There is a quality to public betrayal that makes private mercy feel dishonest. They had chosen witnesses for my decline. I chose them for the correction. At 8:30, Adriano tapped his glass and took the floor. He spoke beautifully. He thanked the staff, honored my father, praised resilience, mentioned temporary strain, enduring values, strategic alignment, new chapters, and the obligation to protect Valley's future with clear-eyed leadership. Then he turned toward me with a softness so rehearsed it almost deserved applause. My brother Matteo, he said, has carried more than anyone should have to in recent months. We love him. We honor everything he has given this house, and for that reason— That's enough, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. Rooms like that are built to hear low voices. Every head turned. I stepped forward into the light between the display platforms and the long table set for the final course. My brother, I said, has always been excellent at speaking about love when he means leverage. No one moved. Adriano smiled thinly. Matteo, perhaps this is not— The right room? I asked. You decided it was the right room to bury me, so let us not become delicate now. Elena's face had gone still in the dangerous way some people manage when their inner calculations accelerate. I looked at Giulio, then at Livia, then at the lenders, then at the journalists who had begun, with discreet hunger, to understand that the evening had improved. For 6 months, I said, money has been moved out of this company through shell entities tied to internal authorizations I did not make. Pension reserves were exposed. My daughter's trust was treated as temporary liquidity. My signature was misused. My health was drafted into a communication strategy. And while these things were being arranged, my wife and my brother were arranging themselves. There are silences that feel like impact. This was one. Adriano laughed once, too quickly. Careful, he said. You sound unwell. Convenient diagnosis, I said, especially from a man billing hotel rooms to corporate hospitality. The first journalist lowered her glass. Elena spoke at last. Stop this. I turned to her. No, I said. You had 23 years to avoid this room. Then I nodded once toward the side entrance. Miriam entered with Farid, 2 officers from the Financial Crimes Unit, and an auditor from our foundation board. Behind them came Clara. She was pale, but she walked without hesitation. Miriam did not waste ceremony. Before any further misrepresentations are made, she said, let the record reflect that the Artisan Heritage Foundation has invoked Clause 17 of the amended governance charter, effective immediately. All transfers of voting control, executive authority, reserve movement, and licensing commitments are frozen pending investigation. The room broke into murmurs. Adriano stared at her. On whose authority? Clara answered. Mine. I watched his face when he heard her voice. That was a private pleasure, I admit it. Not joy, not triumph, recognition. The moment a man realizes the child he patronized has become the wall he cannot walk through. Elena turned to Clara so fast the movement seemed involuntary. What did he tell you? Clara did not look at her mother. I read enough myself. Farid opened a slim case and handed printed summaries to the lenders and board. Miriam gave one to each officer. No theatrics, just paper. Paper ruins more people than bullets ever do, though less romantically. Adriano tried one final tone. This is a misunderstanding blown into performance. Matteo is grieving and paranoid. We were protecting the company. By sleeping with my wife or by stealing from my daughter? I asked. Choose one lie. 2 at once makes the evening untidy. A few people looked away. Elena took a step toward me, her voice low and sharp now, all public softness gone. You think this makes you noble? No, I said. Only accurate. That hurt her. I saw it. Not because she loved me in that moment, because she had been reduced from strategist to participant. Exposure is humiliating mainly because it is clarifying. One of the officers moved toward Adriano and asked for his phone. He refused. She repeated the request. He looked around the room as if waiting for someone to rescue stature from evidence. No one did. Giulio sat down heavily in the nearest chair. Livia covered her mouth. One of the French representatives whispered to his assistant. The dinner dissolved around us without anyone officially ending it. Clara finally looked at her mother. Did you use my trust? She asked. Elena opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. It was temporary, she said. Clara nodded once. There is no sound more final than a child hearing exactly who her parent is. I could have said more then. I had enough. The hotel records, the memos, the internal messages about me, about Clara, about the need to medicate the narrative until it looked compassionate. I had an audio clip, too, from a call Farid preserved, in which Adriano told a banker I was softening, and Elena said I was too proud to notice the room has already turned. I did not play it. Revenge tempts you toward excess. The extra cut, the humiliating flourish, the line everyone remembers. But there is a point where clarity becomes cruelty, and cruelty starts making the injured party resemble the thing that injured him. I was close enough to that line already, so I stopped. Miriam, I said, take over. And she did. I walked away from the center of the room and stood beside a display case holding a travel bag from our heritage line. Stitching my grandfather's workshop had invented. Calfskin the color of old tobacco, something solid from a family that had become anything but. From there, I watched the rest. Phones surrendered, questions asked, board members separated into corners, lenders speaking in urgent, quiet bursts. Elena sitting down at last, not because she had accepted anything, but because her knees had likely stopped negotiating with her. Adriano still standing, still trying to look like a man in discussion rather than a man in collapse. Clara came to stand beside me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she said very quietly, "You should have told me sooner." I looked straight ahead. "Yes." "Did you know about them?" "Only recently." "And if grandfather hadn't left that clause?" I let the silence answer first. Then, "I would have found another door." She nodded. "I hated you for 3 days," she said. "I know. I'm not finished being angry. I know that too." After a while, she slipped her hand into mine the way she had done as a child crossing streets in Rome, Paris, New York, whatever city buying season had dragged us through that year. Her hand was no longer a child's, but the gesture was. That was all the forgiveness I got that night. It was enough. The investigations lasted months. Adriano resigned publicly before he was formally removed. Men like him always prefer language suggesting agency. He tried, through counsel, to frame everything as aggressive financial experimentation undertaken under market pressure. It did not hold. Too many records. Too much coordination. Too many lies layered around the same missing money. Elena left the house within a week of the board dinner. Not for him, as far as I know. Not for me, either. She took an apartment near Porta Romana and sent a note through her lawyer asking for discretion. For Clara's sake. I laughed when I read it. Then I put the note away because laughter alone is an empty form of grief. Our divorce was quiet in the way only very expensive misery can be quiet. No screaming, no broken objects, no public spectacle, just signatures, disclosures, valuations, and the slow administrative dismantling of a life two people once believed was the same thing. Clara did not speak to her mother for 4 months. That was between them. I never encouraged it. I never discouraged it. Parents like to think children want purity from them in moments like that. They do not. They want honesty without recruitment. I gave her what I could. The company survived. That sentence requires explanation, because survival is not the same as victory. We kept the workshops. We protected the pension reserve after painful restructuring. Paris withdrew. Good. I no longer wanted their money, not at that price. 2 board members resigned. 1 lender reduced exposure. We had a difficult winter. There were headlines, rumors, board gossip across the luxury trade. Our sales dipped, then steadied. Customers will forgive scandal faster than families will, especially if the stitching remains excellent. I remained managing director for another 18 months. Then I did something my father would have called sentimental weakness, and my grandfather might have called justice. I shifted meaningful ownership into a long-term employee and artisan trust. With strict family limitations and independent oversight, no brother could charm his way around again. Some thought it vindictive. Some thought it wise. It was both. Revenge becomes cleaner when you turn it into structure. As for Adriano, he avoided prison through restitution, asset seizure, and a cooperation arrangement broad enough to humiliate him for years. He moved to Geneva for a time, then perhaps Madrid. I stopped following. Some exiles do their work better when you never look back at them. Elena and I met once, nearly a year later, in a hotel lounge in Milan because Clara asked us to be in the same room before her graduate exhibition. She looked beautiful, older, smaller somehow, though perhaps betrayal only changes the scale at which we see people. We spoke for 27 minutes. Not about love. Love had ceased to be the relevant archive between us. We spoke about Clara, the exhibition, the apartment renovations, her mother's health. At the end, she asked, "Do you hate me?" I considered lying. Age has made me less interested in mercy that serves only comfort. "No," I said. "I know you too well for that." She took that badly, which means she understood it. Hate is still a form of intimacy. What I felt for Elena by then was sadder and colder. I knew the good in her had once been real. I also knew ambition had found the crack in her where tenderness used to live and widened it until almost everything else fell through. That is not absolution. It is only the truth, as I could bear it. Now, 2 years later, I write this from the smaller house outside Fiesole that I bought after the divorce. Olive trees on the slope, stone steps that hold the sun late, a kitchen too modest for entertaining and therefore perfect for eating honestly. Clara comes on Sundays when she is in Italy, sometimes alone, sometimes with a man named David, who restores old cinemas and has the good sense to speak little before coffee. Last week she stood at my window looking down toward Florence, red roofs dissolving into evening, and asked, "When did you decide not to destroy them completely?" I knew what she meant. The audio, the hotel footage, the ugliest messages, the things I never used. I poured more wine into her glass before answering. "The night of the board dinner," I said. There was a moment I could have crossed from ending the lie into enjoying the wound. I knew if I crossed it, I might still win, but I would lose something I wanted to keep. "What?" "Myself," I said. Then, after a moment, "And whatever chance remained that you might still recognize me after it." She leaned against the counter and studied me in the way adult children do when they begin to see their parents as damaged peers rather than monuments. "Did it feel good?" she asked. "Which part?" "Beating them." I looked out at the darkening hills. There are answers people expect in revenge stories. Clean ones, satisfying ones. The line about justice, the line about sleep, the line about finally breathing again. The truth is less elegant. "It felt necessary," I said. For a while, that was enough. She nodded as if she understood, which frightened and relieved me in equal measure. After she left that night, I stood alone on the terrace until the lights in Florence came on one by one. The city looked almost tender from that distance. Distance lies beautifully. Up close, every family has a locked room, every marriage a ledger, every company a story it tells about itself that usually leaves out the cost. My father was wrong about some things. He believed control could save love if exercised firmly enough. It cannot. Love either survives power or it kneels to it. Once it kneels, it becomes arrangement. But he was right about this. Blood is cheap, loyalty is expensive, truth more so. And revenge, when it is done properly, is almost never loud. It is not a slap, not a gun, not a man standing over the ruins of another man's life feeling tall. It is paperwork opened in the right room. A daughter told the truth before anyone can use her. A structure changed, so the same wound cannot be repeated by the next charming coward with family in his mouth and appetite in his hands. I lost my wife. I lost my brother. I lost the last illusion that the house I built around my life was made of anything stronger than trust. But I kept my name. Not the one on the bags. Not the one on the invoices. The real one. The one a man hears in himself when the room goes silent and he still refuses to kneel. That was all revenge ever meant to me in the end. Not their ruin, my refusal.